The life of Senku Ishigami, Dr. Stone. Senku Ishigami is the main protagonist of Dr. Stone and is friends with Taiji Oki and Yuzuriha Ogawa. He's known for his catchphrases, one of which is 10 billion%. He was de-petrified half a year before Taiju was, and eventually created the revival fluid with Taiju's help. In the stone world, Senku wants to rebuild civilization and establish a kingdom of science. He was the first prize champion of the Grand Bout, and currently holds the title of village chief in Ishigami Village, where he's widely a legend thanks to the late Byakuya's influences throughout his founding village's community. Senku is the de facto leader of the Kingdom of Science. Later, as a member of the Five Wise Generals, Senku provides the ideas and initiatives for their large-scale plans. He counsels with Chrome, Gen, Ukyo, and Ryusui before taking action. Welcome to the Amagi. In today's video, we're going over the life of Senku Ishigami. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media accounts. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. And as always, with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Background: Senku was adopted by Byakuya Ishigami. Nothing is currently known about his birth parents, only that one of them was Byakuya's best friend, and the circumstances that led to the adoption is unknown. During his childhood, Senku always had an interest in science ever since he dreamed about going to space in first grade. Ever since that moment, he had fallen in love with science and started fighting for his dream by reading many books and trying many different experiments and inventions. Over time, with the help of his adoptive father, Senku would gain the means he needed. He would later befriend Taiju and Yuzuriha, where their friendships become unparalleled as they assisted with Senku's experiments. Part of their experiments involved deploying light objects into orbit with a self-made rocket. The Handicrafts Club member, Yuzuriha, made knitted stuffed toys for herself, Senku, and Taiju. The rocket didn't make it all the way to outer space, but it shot the stuffed toys out into space. To help Byakuya pass the swimming exam of the JAXA astronaut program, Senku built a Sparta swimsuit. At age 10, he and Taiju conducted more experiments but failed. Senku then realized he needed professional help, so he sent an email to NASA and told them of his exploits. A scientist called Dr. Zeno replied and tells Senku what he would need to conduct his experiment. Senku and Taiju are stunned by the price, and Senku decides to get the money. Senku flew out to America and met with his father, who's overjoyed to see him again, but becomes disappointed when it turns out that Senku takes his credit card and flies back to Japan. Senku then buys his items and starts experimenting. Sometime later, an older Senku decided that he has a lot to learn. To that end, he decides to travel to Africa to learn about Ebola, while Taiju is shocked by his action. During his time there, Senku ate lion meat. Senku later visited his father at NASA, where he admired the monument of a ship before being approached by Zeno, who silently stood next to him, both obviously knowing each other. An excited Byakuya greets his son and asks why he seems so spaced out. As Senku watches Zeno walking away, and Senku tells his father nothing. Prior to the petrification, Senku watched a televised report of Byakuya on his phone. He was amused when Byakuya told him on live interview that he was going to bring him back space souvenirs. This would be the last time Senku ever saw his father. Stone Formula Arc. Senku first appears when Taiju declares that he's going to confess to Yuzuriha. Senku offers Taiju a potion he proclaims will give Taiju a 10 billion% chance of success. Taiju refuses it, saying he wants to confess and receive a genuine answer from Yuzuriha. Senku then reveals to the other classmate that the potion was actually made of gasoline and would kill Taiju if he drank it. However, he was 10 billion% sure that Taiju would have refused it. When his classmates begin making bets on how Yuzuriha will react to Taiju's confession, with all of them believing she'll reject him, Senku bets 10,000 yen that Yuzuriha has feelings for Taiju as well. Afterwards, the petrification takes place, and Senku, along with everyone else, is turned to stone. While petrified, Senku, who was still conscious, began to count the time of his petrification. Senku also planned to keep track of the season, so he could possibly revive before winter. At some point, his statue wound up in a cave where the droplets freed him from his stone. Upon de-petrifying, Senku has counted up to 117,354,893,870 seconds, meaning that he's been petrified for 3,719 years and 249 days. Senku emerged on April 1st, 5738, Stone Day. Senku marked the day on a tree outside the cave. Freed from his petrification, Senku begins to plan and build towards sustaining himself. After creating clothing and a makeshift house, Senku realized that he would need help in his ventures. That's when he came upon a petrified Taiju and decided to find a way to de-petrify people. He tries theorizing what caused the initial petrification, choosing between an alien invasion, a human mistake, or a new strain of virus. He concludes that the petrification targets only swallows and humans, and there has to be some logic behind it, no matter how much it resembles fiction. He then goes on to discuss how the revival works, pondering over whether he revived by his body being shifted into a cellular form, since the petrified statues are completely made of stone, and whether the degraded surface of his body has to repair itself. He comes to a realization that since only the surface part of the statue degrades, it's the only part that turns into a stone shell and doesn't turn into a cellular form. He goes back to the spot where he was de-petrified and discovers that nitric acid was the cause of his de-petrification. Thus, he begins to test his theory out by applying nitric acid on petrified birds and Taiju, but to no avail. Senku states that the brain uses 400 calories a day to stay alive, which means something in the stone must have fueled enough energy for him to think over 3,700 years. He surmises that adding alcohol, which comprises of ethanol, will turn nitric acid into nitol and might help with the de-petrification. However, he didn't have any alcohol and didn't have the means to obtain it, thus he came to a dead end. Knowing that Taiju might revive soon, he carved a message on the tree Yuzuriha was at and tells him to meet him. That's when Taiju de-petrified on his own and met up with Senku. With Senku as the brain and Taiju as the brawn, they began to work together in order to survive and find a way to de-petrify other people. That's when Taiju comes upon some wild grapes in the forest and suggests the idea of creating alcohol through the wild grapes. After creating alcohol using the wild grape, Senku is ready to test out his theory on nitric acid and ethanol by testing it out on the petrified birds. To their surprise, nitol is the revival fluid that can de-petrify people. Thus, they finally come up with the formula of de-petrification. And being the one who found the wild grapes, Taiju decides that the first person they should de-petrify is Yuzuriha. Versus Tsukasa Arc. As they attempt to de-petrify Yuzuriha, they're attacked by lions and are forced to free the petrified Tsukasa, the strongest primate high schooler. Upon being freed, Tsukasa displays his unbelievable level of adaptation and strength when he quickly understands the situation and proceeds to kill the leader of the lions with a single punch. Freed from danger and having run out of nitol, they all return to their hideout with a petrified Yuzuriha. While at their hideout, Senku begins to talk about his plans to revive humanity to the modern age through the 4 uses of calcium carbonate in seashells. But as Tsukasa begins to show displeasure about Senku's plans of reviving modern humanity, Senku decides to only reveal 3 of its uses, which are agriculture, architecture, and medicine. On their way to procure seashells, Senku gradually begins to notice Tsukasa's desire to maintain the status quo as he destroys petrified statues of old people and suspects that Tsukasa will betray them. For precaution, Senku sends Tsukasa to procure more nitric acid as a ploy to buy them time on what to do. With Tsukasa leaving, Senku quickly tells Taiju to free Yuzuriha with the nitol he procures. Afterwards, he explains to Taiju and the de-petrified Yuzuriha that they only have 2 choices, either stand and fight Tsukasa or run. With the time given to them, Senku tells Taiju and Yuzuriha to escape while making it seem like they ran between their tails. Tsukasa, who wasn't fooled by their ploy, realizes what they're doing and comes after them. At the summit where they test the gunpowder, Senku, Taiju, and Yuzuriha notice a smoke signal confirming the presence of other humans. They want to send a signal fire back, but are aware that it'll give away their position to Tsukasa. Finally, after some deliberation, Senku tells them to light up smoke signals themselves to establish contact with the unknown human. Upon seeing the signal, Tsukasa catches up with them and takes Yuzuriha hostage. He bargains with Senku for the de-petrification formula in exchange for Yuzuriha. Senku agrees and gives him the formula. Tsukasa then once more asks Senku to stop trying to advance humanity and join him, for he didn't want to kill. Senku then declines, saying that that's the only thing he can't do. Tsukasa proclaims that had they met 3,700 years ago, Senku might have been his first friend. With a heavy heart, Tsukasa breaks Senku's cervical plexus, which results in Senku dying. As Taiju returns from lighting the smoke signals, he witnesses an unconscious Senku on the floor with Yuzuriha in tears. As Yuzuriha and Taiju stop to examine Senku, they notice that part of Senku's neck is still petrified, which might have protected him from Tsukasa's blow. They quickly apply the de-petrification formula to Senku's neck, hoping that he'll wake up. After crying out to Senku many times, Senku manages to return to his senses. From there, Senku asks Yuzuriha and Taiju to return to Tsukasa's empire as spies so that Senku can keep tabs on him. Thus, they part ways as Senku ventures out by himself to build his kingdom of science to combat Tsukasa. Kingdom of Science Arc. On his travel, Senku meets Kohaku, the person who lit up the smoke signals. She's defeated by Tsukasa and is underneath a tree, which renders her unable to move. Senku helps her lift the tree with the use of pulleys, which she thanks him for. She even goes as far to declaring a liking for Senku. Disturbed to hear a stranger's love confession, Senku voices his uninterest in the matter before Kohaku clarifies that she means it in a platonic manner. She soon applauds him for his gallantry for sacrificing his life to save Yuzuriha, which she had earlier seen. She then asks Senku to come with her to her village because she was astounded by his science, which she refers to as sorcery. After talking to Kohaku, Senku realizes that Kohaku and her village are descendants of humans who were able to avoid the petrification 3,700 years ago, and have survived since then, meaning that they grew up not knowing the modern world. Upon arriving at the village, Senku is attacked by Kinro and Ginro, who suspect him of being in exile. After astounding them with his soap bubble sorcery, Senku is confronted by Chrome, the self-proclaimed sorcerer of the village. Chrome challenges Senku to a sorcery battle, with the stake being all his life gatherings and himself versus Senku kneeling before him and promising to never step foot near the village again. Chrome, of course, is utterly defeated by Senku and has to surrender everything to Senku. Soon after settling down, Kohaku reveals to Senku that her sister Ruri is sick and that Chrome has been trying to find a cure for her. Wanting to get the village to trust him more, Senku proclaims that he has a cure-all medicine that might work on Ruri. The cure he's talking about is antibiotics. He explains to them that they could either go towards the sulfur drug route or the penicillin blue mold route to make antibiotics. They decide to take the sulfur route due to it being more abundant in the area. After gathering enough iron, the crew returns to the village outskirts so that Senku can prepare a furnace to melt the iron. In order to melt the iron, they need to reach a temperature of 1500 degrees Celsius. Thus, they resort to adding more air to the fire in order to increase the temperature. But due to the lack of manpower, they're unsuccessful in melting the iron. Needing more manpower, Senku asks Suika to infiltrate the village and find out what the villagers want in order to bribe them into helping. After finding out that better tasting food can buy the help of the village, Senku asks the team to gather green foxtail to grind into flour and then make ramen. The plan is a success, but during their cooking session, they're intruded by Gen Asagiri, a modern-day mentalist who's currently working for Tsukasa. Tsukasa had sent Asagiri to make sure that Senku is truly dead, but with Senku now being able to produce iron, Asagiri is having second thoughts on supporting Tsukasa. He then asks Senku to give him a reason why he should support Senku's cause. Senku tells him that with the power of science, he'll bring back electricity and the applications that go along with it. And with the metal melted with the effort of the village, Senku is able to build a mechanical electricity generator. Senku uses the manual-powered electricity generator to show the villagers light by conducting it through a roasted bamboo fiber. Just before Asagiri can make his decision, he's stabbed by Magma, who mistakes Asagiri for Senku. The group find Gen, who Senku points out survived because he carried fake blood packs on his person. Having thought that he killed Senku, Magma proclaims himself the most powerful out of the villagers who will marry Ruri to take over the village as chief. This is when Chrome and Kohaku explain to Senku that the village is holding a tournament in a few months in order to decide the next chief. Since Ruri, the priestess of the village, has turned 18, she'll have to marry the winner and become the new chief's bride. They then explain that Magma only has eyes on the chief's seat and feels nothing for Ruri. Rather, he would prefer to let Ruri die once he becomes chief so he can do what he wants. Seeing this as an obstacle to his plan of saving Ruri and gaining the village's trust, Senku entrusts Kohaku with the task of defeating Magma while he and Chrome continue their mission on creating antibiotics. In order to formulate antibiotics, Senku requires beakers and flasks, which can withstand acid. Thus, Senku decides that the next thing they should gather is sand, which contains silica used to make glass. With everyone's help, they're able to gather enough sand and produce their first glasses, which Senku uses to produce lenses in order to help Suika, who's revealed to be nearsighted. Although they now have the ability to make glass, without proper technique and experience, Senku and the others aren't able to create what they need. Thus, they resort to kidnapping Kaseki, the craftsman of the village. At first, Kaseki refuses to help, but after being piqued by the fact that Senku can produce glass and is angered by how wasteful and terrible Senku and the others are at making it, Kaseki reluctantly decides to help them. And with Kaseki's help, they're able to create the perfect lab for Senku to use. After seeing the lab, Senku can't help but reminisce about the time his father sold his car to buy him a lab. While in his lab, Senku is disturbed by Ginro and Kinro, with Ginro proclaiming that since Senku has so much, surely he can make a silver spear for the two of them. Senku smiles and offers to make Ginro a silver spear, but only if Ginro is willing to help them find the hardest formula for antibiotics. Ginro agrees, and thus Senku makes him a silver spear. But little did Ginro know that the silver spear Senku made for him is going to be used to detect a poison so deadly that it can kill a person within seconds. As they make their way to the top of the mountain, Senku warns Ginro that he best focus the point of his spear far ahead of him, because once the silver on his spear turns black, that'll signal his death. Senku then explains that the item they're going to procure is called sulfuric acid, which only exists at the top of a mountain in Emerald Lake. But the Emerald Lake produces deadly poisonous gases called hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide. In order to detect the distance of the gas, Ginro's spear will be used because hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide will react with silver, turning it black. After gauging the distance of the poisonous gas, Senku and the others return home in order to produce protective masks that can filter the poison. But upon making the masks, Senku tells Chrome to stay while Senku alone will go to procure the sulfuric acid. Chrome protests, saying he too will go with Senku. Senku then reminds Chrome that they're the only two scientists left in existence and one of them has to survive. Senku volunteers himself to go because he has higher chance of getting the sulfuric acid unharmed due to his knowledge. Senku is ready to pass on his knowledge of science to Chrome before he leaves when Chrome outright refuses it. He tells Senku that 2 scientists on the job are better than 1 and that failure will not be an option, thus convincing Senku to let Chrome go with him. At the Emerald Lake, Senku advises Chrome to remain calm as heavy breathing can cause the mask's filter to fail and can lead to his death. They approach the Emerald Lake, but acid spews out and burns part of Senku's mask tube. Chrome is able to warn Senku in time, but loses his step and almost falls into the Emerald Lake. Luckily, Ginro arrives in time with his own mask to save Chrome from falling. They're able to procure the sulfuric acid and return home. Village Games Arc. Now the only thing they need to make the antibiotics is alcohol, to which Kaseki reminds them that they can get it from the village if they win the tournament. With Senku's return, he, Chrome, and Ginro, along with Kohaku, decide to enter the tournament to procure the alcohol and to increase their odds of winning. Their goal is to weaken Magma before his fight with Kinro, which will give Kinro a bigger chance of winning. Unfortunately, Kinro and Magma end up paired for the first match. During the fight, Mantle gets caught trying to interfere and is told off, forcing Senku to dispose of his own various poisons, blades, and arrows he was planning on throwing at the combatants. Before the second round begins, Kohaku is told Suika is in danger, so she runs off to save her. Just before Kohaku returns, Magma orders Mantle to surrender their match, disqualifying Kohaku from the tournament, and Senku wins by default. The next match is between Senku and Ginro. It's obvious that Senku's plan worked. With Magma out of the picture, all they need to do now is throw the match for Chrome to win. But with Ruri proclaiming that she'll dedicate her life to whoever wins, Ginro betrays Senku and starts the fight in order to win and become chief. Annoyed with his intentions and betrayal, Senku uses Suika's helmet that was laying around as leverage to knock the wind out of Ginro's crotch. Senku becomes the victor in the match. With only Senku and Chrome as the contestants, Senku is determined to surrender for Chrome's happy ending. To Senku's surprise, Chrome falls unconscious during the match and Senku is declared the winner. Senku, who reluctantly marries Ruri, is more than happy to accept the alcohol that's given to the winner. When the chief tells Senku that he is married to Ruri by right, Senku merely states that he wants a divorce and escapes to his lab to create the antibiotic. Now with all of the ingredients, Senku is in the process of going over the 25 steps of making antibiotics. Asahiri, who's just wasting around, is confronted by Kaseki and is forced to help out. With everyone's help, Senku is able to make the antibiotic and thanks everyone for their help. As for Asagiri, Senku is able to make a cola and leaves it for him as they promised. Senku quickly enters the village and gives the antibiotics to Ruri, but instead of improving her situation, the antibiotic worsens her health, which the village chief scorns Senku for. But for Senku, it's a good thing because the symptoms that Ruri is now showing have paved the road to determine the sickness. Senku determines that Ruri has pneumonia. Senku suggests attacking the illness by sulfa drugs, but Ruri's father rages in contrast, forbidding Senku from feeding his daughter anything else. That's when Chrome, Kohaku, Kaseki, Ginro, and Kinro voice their opinion and their support of Senku's action. Having so many people put their faith in Senku, Ruri's father concedes and Senku is able to cure Ruri. With Ruri cured, the village finally allows Senku into their ranks and proclaims him as their chief. To Senku's surprise, he finally learns that the village was named Ishigami, which is Senku's last name. Village Origins Arc. Ruri approaches Senku, revealing that she's heard the story from her mother, the previous priestess, about Senku and his father Byakuya. This makes Senku realize that everyone in Ishigami Village are descendants of his adoptive father, who avoided the petrification because he went on a mission to outer space. This brings back Senku's memories of his adoptive father and how he helped his father become an astronaut. He explains to Chrome and Kohaku that the person who created the village that they're in was his father. Byakuya Ishigami. Once Kohaku realizes that the people in the village might be Senku's relatives, the latter assures her that Byakuya isn't his biological father, but an adoptive one, as well as that they're hundreds of generations apart, which means that even if they're related, it wouldn't mean much. Ryusui states that the final part of the last story of 100 Tales is a message for Senku and that only he should hear it. Senku comes to know that his father left him allies to support him once he de-petrified, claiming that the souvenirs he promised to bring back to him come in the form of people who passed the 100 Tales. His father strongly believes in him, being certain that Senku will revive civilization even if he has to do it from scratch. Senku and Ryusui eventually reach the founder's graveyard. Senku tells Ryusui he will wander for a while, prompting Ryusui to leave him alone. Being alone, he recalls his fond memories of his father and sheds a tear for him, saying that he's grateful for the souvenirs he's received. Back at the village, Gen is being offered alcohol, which he refuses, as he has to pass an important message. Senku approaches him and inquires about the status in the Tsukasa Empire. Gen informs the group that an assault from Tsukasa is imminent. Versus Hyoga Arc. He hears Gen report that Tsukasa has revived a warrior called Hyoga, who's just as strong as Tsukasa. When Kinro is wounded by Hyoga, Senku teams up with Magma again to make a bluff about having guns to chase off Hyoga by triggering a small gunpowder explosion in a steel pipe and synchronizing it with Magma's rock throw to make it look like the bullet had been fired. Staring down his foe, Senku is told that Tsukasa will be more than happy to know of his survival and weapon advancement as Hyoga leaves the battlefield. Senku knows that Hyoga and his men will return after Gen talks them into attacking through a storm. Knowing that gunpowder won't be useful in rain, he decides to make something that will give him a better chance against them and creates new glasses for Kinro and Suika. Soon, he, Chrome, and Kaseki equip the Ishigami Village warriors with katanas. He also creates a small knife that he gives to Suika to give to Gen, which he uses to sabotage Hyoga's spear. However, things go south where Homura sets the village on fire. He and Kohaku save Suika from the acid gas using gas masks, with Suika bluffing to Hyoga's men that he created it. To verify the claim that the poisonous gas exists, Hyoga pushes some of his men where the gas has accumulated, which quickly kills them. With this, Hyoga concludes that a retreat is necessary and that the next time they come, they'll come with the full force of Tsukasa's army. Gen worries about the incoming attack with the full force of the enemy's army, while Senku assures him with the option of a preemptive strike instead. He promised the Kingdom of Science a new invention that would allow him to do so. Communications Arc. Senku explains that by using communication technology, they could utilize espionage to gain more information on the opposing army's movements as well as convey information between themselves, thereby possibly even reducing casualties to zero and decisively winning the war at the same time. When asked who can be the potential double agent in Tsukasa's army, Senku mentions his friends Taiju and Yuzuriha, who have already infiltrated it for a long time. Once the schematic on making a phone is made, a discouraged Gen laments on the amount of materials that need to be transformed and used to craft it, while Chrome and Kaseki are greatly excited to see the things needed to be made. Senku states that no matter how long the pathway to making it is, as long as rules are followed, the outcome is a complete success. He briefly explains to Chrome and Kaseki how the voice's small output of electricity is amplified by cell phones, creating electromagnetic waves which are then received on the other end. In order to make a cell phone, the first item that needs to be crafted is a cotton candy machine, much to Gen's shock. Senku goes on to tell that the centrifugal force spinning the material would force the tiny strands of sugar out of the small holes in the body. This same mechanism can be applied when making fine wires for the cell phone in the form of gold wires. As Chrome rushes to gather the gold necessary, Senku stops him, as they first need to test it out on cotton candy in case it's a failed device. Senku gathers the hardened sake from the fire caused by Homura and boils it in order to acquire rock sugar. As Gen jokingly thanks Homura for starting a fire once cotton candy's made, the scientist asks Gen whether he knows of Homura's character. Ginro hears this and starts teasing Senku about liking petite girls, with Sapphire, Ruby, Garnet, and Shovel leaning in to listen. Senku, however, states that the reason behind his question is being spied on by Homura. By observing them, Homura will know whether there's a major change in activity or an attempt at escaping. Gen informs Senku that Homura is extremely loyal and has utmost respect for Hyoga, so the possibility of her defecting is slim to none. Senku, in return, offers some cotton candy for Homura, which the latter eventually consumes. The scientist is hoping to goad Homura to his side by offering her sweets, which Gen praises. Senku warns the villagers that they have a few months before the onslaught of Tsukasa's forces. In order to stop Tsukasa, they'll need to craft a cell phone by spring. Senku scolds Ginro for improperly spinning the cotton candy machine, as Ginro is getting frustrated with the process. When the latter asks how can they be so calm even when having a short time interval to make a cell phone, Senku replies that he's being serious about cotton candy's flavor. Gen filling in that the imperfections in the cotton candy would mean imperfections in the gold wire that's planned to be made afterwards. Before utilizing the gold for wiring, they need to pin down the causes of imperfections first. It turns out that while Kinro and Ginro were spinning the machine, the rotational force was being decelerated while turning the opposite way, therefore creating the problem. The previously made generator doesn't go fast enough, and a kilometer-long rope is impractical for the brothers' endurance. Ukyo adds that it's also a problem of resources, as the village can't afford to waste all manpower on cell phone work since it needs to prepare for the winter. With little options left, Senku improvises by creating gears to ease the burden on the spinners. He notices that Kohaku's shield would serve as a perfect gear material, while Kohaku agrees to use it, much to Kokyo's shock. As it turns out, Chrome got an idea to make the water wheel, and after 3 hard-working days, he returns with Kaseki to Senku to let him know of their new creation. After Senku witnesses the craft himself, he's pleasantly surprised that the two crafted it with little knowledge of the mechanism beforehand. Senku happily declares the end of the age of manpower and the arrival of automated machine power. Gen is amazed at the new invention, as Senku tells him that the people he should praise are Chrome and Kaseki, who truly deserved it. However, Senku states that the water wheel is not yet complete, as the electricity is coming at a trickle. In order to store the electricity, the village will need batteries. The 2 lead plates are stored inside a small tank filled with sulfuric acid, Senku commenting on how easy it is to store electrical power, while Chrome complains that the endeavor still took immense amounts of effort nonetheless. Senku then mentions that they will need 5 more batteries like these to connect them all. Ginro realizes that since an automated source of power is made, he wouldn't need to spin the manual generator with his brother anymore. He inquires Senku, and the latter confirms this, both brothers greatly relieved to hear it. As Senku enthusiastically attempts to carve himself a gear, it breaks apart, much to his chagrin. Chrome and Kaseki join him once again, excited about the back-and-forth gear mechanism. The villagers celebrate the newfound automated generator. Sometime later, Gen approaches Senku to ask what the craftsman group is making. Senku replies that they're making a light bulb. However, as the gold wire reaches temperatures of 2000 degrees, it'll start to melt, so they need to reinforce the body with an adhesive. While making the bulb, it suddenly breaks apart. Chrome gets frustrated at the difficulty of making a light bulb as Senku calls him out on his resolve. When asked by Chrome on what they're going to do about the wire burning out last time they created light, Senku goads Chrome into coming up with an answer on his own: take away the air. Senku uses mercury's properties to create a vacuum inside a light bulb, thereby preventing the wire from burning out. On Christmas, the group lights the tree with light bulbs they've created. As Kaseki reflects on the time it took to make light bulbs, Senku replies that everything's going according to plan. All according to Keikaku. Chrome gets another idea. Now that they have light bulbs and batteries, they can further explore the caves they went into beforehand. In accordance to the future projects, Senku says that the group will require an additional heap of materials, which makes Chrome excited. To Kaseki's inquiry on what the next project's going to be, the former declares a new objective: to make a vacuum tube, an antecedent of the computer. To Gen's bewilderment on what this device actually is, Senku explains that it represents the gear in an electric sense, the heart of the cell phone. The scientist goes on to elaborate to Kaseki that they'll have to make a vacuum inside of it, just like they did with the light bulb. Chrome returns, now with an adequate amount of copper just in time for Senku to produce a copper tube. Since it's hollow, it won't be able to expand and break the vessel during the heat-up process of creating vacuum space in it. However, another problem arises as the bamboo filament burns out. As the crew questions what material they should use next, Senku sadly states that such a resource doesn't exist in this era. After countless attempts of the villagers to find the proper material for a vacuum tube, Senku is woken up by Gen to watch the sunrise of the new year, much to his annoyance. Coincidentally, once the group gathers around the sunrise, Suika's newly found stone begins shining a beautiful blue color. Senku quickly realizes that Suika has found tungsten, an exceedingly rare material that can withstand heat and would be ideal for the projects they're making. He commends Senku and Suika on their discovery, and picks Magma to be a mining partner for an additional trip to retrieve more tungsten, surprising everyone. As they approach the cave, Senku comments on the lukewarm temperatures, allowing them to explore the cave better. A worried Chrome asks the former about his decision of bringing Magma to the cave exploration, noting that Magma is a dangerous individual who might seize the opportunity to attack him. Senku retorts that it's their only option, as even though the tungsten's suited for this cave, they would require Magma's strength to mine it. Further along the line, Senku abruptly stops, explaining that they came upon a rock called mica. It's a rock of such brittle structure that it can break while stepping on it and sends you to a hole, impressing Chrome, who comments on the nature's traps. All of a sudden, Magma notices the floor under Senku slowly crumbling and quickly reacts by pushing him away, only for the floor under the former to fall apart. Senku manages to grab Magma's arm as Chrome warns him that he himself might fall with Magma as the rocks are starting to deteriorate. Chrome blames Magma for wanting to send Senku to a cave pit, which Magma plays along with. The latter plays along, saying that weak men like them became leaders, while it's rules of nature for the strong to rule, and get women as it's always been. He claims that the strong rule the world in this age, stating that weaklings being able to take over the muscle in Senku's world is no more. He laments on the fact that if it weren't for Senku, he'd be the ruler of the village. Senku and Magma both fall into the hole during this exchange. As Senku moves around, an annoyed Magma orders him to stop shuffling around. The former responds that he's merely taking measurements of the cave, and that it's better to do so than screaming, falling into the pit, and burying them alive, like Magma's doing. They're interrupted by Chrome, who begins pouring in water. Senku warns Magma once again not to scream at Chrome, as that will assure the rocks fall on them. Chrome explains that by pouring water, it'll allow the duo to get out of the hole. Senku does an inner circulation, determining that they might just barely make it in the 6 hours necessary to fill the pit. The scientist tutors Chrome on making a tool for transferring water with Magma's help. To this, he explains to Magma that in the old world, the weaklings didn't dominate the strong, it was just a simple division of labor. In the old world, everyone was useful, and who the boss was didn't matter. As Magma is still very dissatisfied about losing the position of village chief, Senku promises him amazing things humanity has conjured up, which he would have never saw if it wasn't for him. As they fill the pit, Senku's showing signs of hypothermia. Chrome's anxiety is broken by Magma, who propels Senku out of the hole, threatening to kill him if he becomes boring. Senku confidently states science can never be boring. The scientist is grateful for Magma's absurd strength, as without it, they would need to hug each other to maintain warmth, disgusting both Chrome and Magma at the thought of it. He celebrates the group finding a large ore deposit which he transformed into a collection of rare materials over the years. Senku states that without Magma, the collection of these materials would be impossible. After the collection, an ecstatic Chrome notes how it's the bonds of friendship, not rocks, that were the most important thing made in this exploration, disgusting Magma and Senku, who berate him on his awkwardness. Surprisingly, on their way back, Senku is blindfolded by Magma and taken back to the village, being greeted by Gen. He arrives at the conclusion that the village decided to trade Senku's life for their stability. Instead, however, the entire thing is a ruse in order to gift an observatory to an unsuspecting scientist. Senku reacts rationally, saying that the telescope could assist them in battling Tsukasa. Much to everyone's chagrin, Gen confesses that he came to know Senku's birthday after he wrote the day he was de-petrified and told him the amount of days he's lived. The reasoning for remembering this is that he's liked Senku for his attributes from the start. The latter, although very glad, reacts with apparent disgust towards these emotions. On Kohaku's question on how to extract tungsten from the rock, Senku says that it's the hard part of the process. The rocks are quickly smashed by Magma and Mantle, with Senku saying that they needed to grind them to dust anyway. Surprised about Magma's behavior, Ukyo asks Senku what happened in the cave. Senku is unsure how to answer. To remove debris off tungsten, they'll have to use hydrogen, which involves heating it in a bottle. Senku scolds Kaseki and Chrome for being too hasty, as heating a bottle will simply melt it, so they have to use precision and melt only the metal. He motivates Chrome to think for himself, saying that him being his professor is needless, and is promptly annoyed by Gen not understanding the purification process. Senku is delighted to see the purified tungsten, but at the same time surprised by the huge material Kaseki and Chrome brought. Nevertheless, the equipment is more than enough to make the filament as the group celebrates its creation. After Ruri compares his phone to a bee and talks about a story about a bee talking with the dead, he and Gen realize she's talking about a record player. He discovers a time capsule containing a message from Byakuya. Senku is touched by his father's belief and promises to show the villagers what humanity was like in his time. Using the phone, he talks to Taiju and Yuzuriha for the first time since they split. Later on, Senku notes that he'll need Taiju and Yuzuriha, who enter the woods and find Senku. After a year apart, Senku is happy to reunite with his friends. He brokers a ceasefire with Tsukasa in exchange for de-petrifying his sister Mirai. Senku theorizes that the petrification will cure Mirai's brain deadness, which it does. Hyoga attacks Tsukasa and he and Senku team up to defeat Hyoga. Due to his injuries, Senku cryo-freezes Tsukasa. Age of Exploration Arc. Senku de-petrifies Ryusui and sets out to find oil. Senku officially becomes recognized as one of the Kingdom of Science's 5 wise generals. The kingdom recreates a motorboat, and as they prepare to use it, Senku speaks with Taiju, who asks about Senku's love potion. Senku laughs as he tells Taiju that it was merely gasoline, as Ryusui remarks how they made it to the point before the petrification in inventing. During the boat test run, Senku and the others receive a transmission from an unknown person. After a year of building, he and the Kingdom of Science are able to build the Perseus. Treasure Island Arc. After setting foot on the island with Gen, Kohaku, and Soyuz, the crew of the Perseus is petrified by Ibara and his forces. Senku and the others meet Amaryllis, who, along with Kohaku, will infiltrate the harem. They later come across the ship where they find their allies petrified. Thanks to Kohaku's code, they realize that there are some who survived the attack, but Senku isn't pleased to find out Ginro survived. Nevertheless, he's happy to see Suika, who had stowed away on the ship, survive, and the two reclaim the mobile lab. With the lab, they make a base in a cave and put their plan into action. Kohaku and Ginro, who are given a makeover, infiltrate the harem with Amaryllis. After Senku and Ryusui defeat Ibara and claims the petrification weapon, Senku nearly bemoans that he's alone again, but Ruri contacts him and he sees that he isn't. During the celebration, Senku then proceeds to revive everyone who was petrified, including his former enemy Kirisame. He questions her on Kohaku and Ginro's whereabouts, and he subsequently revives them. That night, Wyman contacts them again and fills the airwaves with 12,800,000 meters 1 second. Senku isn't concerned as he keeps the petrification weapon away. However, Senku's shocked that Wyman spoke in his voice. New America City Arc. After a number of theories as to why the Y-Man has his voice, Ukyo soon states that the latter is using a synthetic voice, and Senku's eager to find out answers. The next day, Senku and his allies revive those on the island. They later tend to the unknown statue Taiju brought up, before they notice he has a symbol on his arm matching the device. Senku then revives the man who is a warrior called Matsukaze, and he tells Senku they were formerly dozens of the petrification weapons that fell from the sky. With this little info, they're able to calculate that Y-Man is on the moon. Senku makes plans to invade the moon. Later that night, Senku soon finds the capsule that his father's astronaut team traveled in to return to Earth, with him and Kohaku remarking on why the island is called Treasure Island. The next day, as the crew prepares for their voyage home, Soyuz decides to stay and revive those who were petrified by Ibara, since he memorized the revival formula. Senku permits it and wishes him luck. Soyuz then has Kirisame join Senku. Before leaving the island, Senku had a radio tower built, along with a flag placed there, symbolizing it's now part of the Kingdom of Science. Senku returns to the mainland and uses the petrification weapon to petrify and revive Tsukasa, informing him of their plan to fly to the moon. After concerns are made of his scars, Gen has everyone adorn paint to recreate their scars, so they can remove them after Y-Man is defeated. Senku has Yuzuriha and Kaseki build a 3D model for him. Once the globe's done, a stunned Senku notes on how overboard they went and built a giant globe in a makeshift planetarium with several cities named after their resources. Nevertheless, Senku's impressed and explains that they'll revive the people on each continent and work with them to establish these cities. During the voyage, he and Ryusui argue over which route to take. They settle the dispute over the recreated game of poker, with Gen siding with Ryusui. Senku notes that they might cheat, but Kohaku joins him using her keen eyesight. Despite Gen's tactics, Senku wins the game since his allergies helped and Perseus takes his route. Soon Francois builds a bar and Senku listens to Matsukaze's past. Soon he decides to revive Hyoga, telling him that he's needed to train the warriors of the ship. Hyoga agrees, but in return he asks Senku to revive some people, Mozu and Homura. Senku and Ryusui later describe traveling the seas in ancient days. When Gen questions how GPS works in the stone world, Senku explains with the help of those in Japan. When a storm hits, Gen berates Senku's poor luck, but Chrome creates a sunstone. When they reach San Francisco, Senku sees the statues of others lined up. Gen sadly discusses to Senku his hope that the lie he fabricated for the fake Lillian had been true, that America had recovered from the petrification or beaten it altogether. Very soon, the crew of the Perseus separates, with the warrior team following the exploration team in the case of an attack. While passing through the river, the group wondered about the corn since it's about the time where it would wither. Gen states America is vast and they may not find any. As Senku states, they have a chance of being attacked. Soon the mobile lab is attacked by alligators, something Gen chalks up to Senku's bad luck, and the latter panics. However, he's in awe at the warriors being eager for a challenge, and driven by their hunger, they attacked most of the beasts, while the rest fled in fear. That night, the crew set up camp before Senku notes that corn was growing, since certain bugs are attracted, and questions that. However, Tsukasa and the others note an eerie feeling and alerts everyone to retreat inside the boat. This is where they take cover. Surely enough, bullets rain down and Senku ducks for cover in the lab. After the guns stop shooting, Ryusui has the group enter the boats before fleeing the scene. Once at a safe distance, the group notes on the events, wondering if America really survived, but Ryusui brings up the statues. Ukyo then brings up the plausible cause of someone reviving on their own like Senku. Hearing this, a gleeful Senku notes they should be grateful because they did the grunt work. However, he notes if the person is a scientist, then that person is finished because he won't lose in his strongest field. The group escape on the river, with Senku telling Taiju that it's likely someone revived even earlier than him. Soon, Ukyo hears an engine before Senku is shocked to witness an aircraft flying above them, staring at it in awe. Fortunately, Senku comes up with a plan and has Kirisame bring the plane down with a substance as the pilot escapes. Senku has the plane salvaged, wanting to use it in the future, while Ryusui supports this plan. Senku and the others realize the enemy will perform a tactical retreat. When Perseus gets another call, Senku has Chrome and Kohaku limit interaction before he hangs up. He explains that the enemy will most likely trace the call frequency. Surely enough, the Perseus receives another call, and it's Dr. Zeno, who has located the frequency of the group's communication. Zeno requests to start negotiating with Dr. Taiju, something that leaves Senku along with the crew confused. Senku realizes this was because Gen and Taiju dressed up, despite it being a call, and talks with Zeno while being walked through by Senku on what to say. Zeno tells Taiju that his side has a clear technological advantage, with Senku telling the others Zeno has a factory that can produce mass amounts of ammunition. Taiju acts out that he knew this, as Zeno is none the wiser, and Taiju's friends are impressed by his acting. Zeno makes them an offer to completely surrender and serve him since his manpower is lacking, as he has no means to de-petrify the statues. These words cause Ryusui to realize the enemy doesn't have revival fluid. Zeno also mentions that only those who have been aware during all 3,700 years can be revived with nitric acid alone, before questioning how he revived the statues, thereby unintentionally confirming to the group that he has no idea about the revival fluid. Taiju innocently attempts to answer Zeno's question about how to make the miracle formula, but is stopped by Ryusui, who along with Senku informs him they will simply crush the group once they have the manpower to do so. Senku states that they could have Corn City running with the formula. With this, Taiju rejects Zeno's offer and Zeno promptly ends the call. The group hear a noise and spot another plane, shocked the enemy had another one. The Perseus crew asks Senku what they should do, as Senku states they'll battle the enemy in the sky with their new vessels. Senku announces to the crew that he and Kaseki are going to fix up the plane after building a runway for the Perseus. With the help of his crew, the runway for the Perseus is made. He and Ryusui are in mutual agreement for the possibilities of the plane. Senku tasks Yuzuriha with replacing the wheels on the plane. He also decides to send a small team to capture Zeno, the team consisting of Tsukasa, Hyoga, Ukyo, and Suika. When a battered woman named Luna arrives, she begs them for help after escaping Zeno. As the crew wonder about her situation, Senku approaches her and kindly helps her. The crew are taken aback by his altruistic behavior, while Yuzuriha notes he has a motive. Surely enough, it's revealed Senku intends to butter up the girl to extract info from her. As Luna continues to adjust to the crew, Senku and Ryusui converse on getting info from Luna. To that end, Senku continues to put up a kind nature and surprises her while making no qualms of hiding his intentions of getting info. To his crew's shock, Ryusui stops him and tells Senku he'll have Francois recreate ice cream. After Luna enjoys the treat, Senku notices and she states if Zeno was present, he would say the word elegant. Senku is greatly shocked, asking Luna if Zeno was a NASA scientist, something she confirms. The crew are greatly shocked by Senku's familiarity, and Ryusui asks Senku how he knows him, and Senku reveals that Zeno was his science mentor. After recounting his story with Zeno, Senku reveals that he has a plan and brings out the petrification weapon, which is still not powered, but he intends to use it to draw Dr. Zeno. After Ryusui alerts the crew about the sniper, everyone scatters while Senku notices Luna looking in the direction, but gives away his position to Stanley Snyder. Thinking quickly, Senku mixes an unknown starch and water, creating dilatant fluid, which he remembers was tested for use in bulletproof vests. He gets the bag in front of himself just in time for the bullet to pierce the wall and fragment, hitting the bag in multiple places. Despite this act, Senku is still wounded after the bullet fragments hit him. Laying wounded, Senku reveals his speculation that Stanley aimed at his chest because Stanley believed Senku may be the only one who knows the revival formula and wanted to give Senku time to pass on the formula before he dies. The group is relieved he's alive as Francois tends to him. He puts faith in Chrome. Barely conscious, Senku has Francois translate his plan to send the powerless petrification weapon to Zeno and have someone describe its ability. After Minami questions if they have someone who could do that, Senku was confident that Gen was the one fit for the job. He wakes up to Luna tending to him, instructing Luna to hear his chest and determine that blood is pooling in his left lung. Senku orders her to remove the blood with a syringe and do transfusion with a crew member. Luna agrees, but makes a request for him in exchange for her services. He denies it if she wants to surrender, but she tells him that he must become her boyfriend, much to Senku's shock. Senku presumably agreed to Luna's request because she later stated that they were dating. Meanwhile, Ryusui and the others have gotten the aircraft carrier and plane ready, with a slowly recovering Senku acting as his co-pilot. Senku is eager for an aerial battle between him and Stanley to commence. Senku and Ryusui set off. Though Senku is bothered by the high altitude, he's amazed to see how far they reached. He assures Ryusui that while the plane was hastily put together, it'll fly. They engage in an aerial battle with Stanley, hoping it ends with the enemy being scared by the fake machine gun. After a series of unorthodox methods, they trick Stanley, and Senku notes the odds were in their favor. Using the same method of settling gas that he used to bring down Stanley's first plane, he causes the engine to stall. However, Senku and Ryusui is also brought down after being hit by some of the gas. Ryusui and Senku survive the crash and tell Stanley to come out of the wreckage, but it's not Stanley, but rather a member of the squad. Undaunted, Senku uses her communicator to send a message to the gloating Zeno, where he tells his former mentor that he was not the only one who sent his knight. Shocked, Zeno is then confronted by Tsukasa, who holds him at sword point. Afterwards, Senku and Ryusui journey to the enemy castle, arriving to meet up with the others. Senku describes Zeno to the others as the latter is shocked and amazed that his former pupil survived. Sharing some words with his former mentor about his survival, Senku promises to talk later. Zeno questions what his next move is with his allies captured. Soon Luna, Francois, and Max arrive along with Kaseki. He congratulates Luna on sneaking away from the ship, with her being flattered. Knowing the enemy will soon appear, they commandeer one of the enemy's spare boats. They go over the few people in the American colonies that wouldn't like to see bloodshed. They soon realize the candidate is none other than Dr. Brody, the mechanic of the colony. Senku speaks with him for a truce. Brody is uninterested until Senku offers him something he would like. To the shock of his allies, he reveals the ingredients for the revival formula. He tells Brody that his crew will be more than willing to help him, should they be guaranteed safety. South America Arc. After escaping Stanley's grasp, Senku's confident on reaching South America while ignoring the panicking of his friends. As they sail, the crew ponder on what they'll find in South America before Zeno reveals that he's aware of the Y-Man and the signal coming from the moon, which surprises Senku and the others. Senku notes how it wasn't odd Zeno noticed, becoming excited as Zeno hopes they can work together to figure out the course of the personification, and they proceed to exchange information. After realizing that it'll take years for them to sail around the continent, and with Stanley on their tail, the group decides the best bet is to scale across the continent itself. Taking a break for supplies on the California coastline, they reach a deserted island. They soon discover a geographer called Chelsea, who has the same fuzzy sickness as Suika. After making her some glasses, Senku learns she's acquainted with Zeno, as well as the fact that his research on the petrified birds brought her to NASA. Chelsea eagerly joins the team and tells them that the best way to get across the continent is via motorcycles, prompting Senku to create a roadmap on the steps they need to make one. With Chelsea on board, they update her on the recent events, such as the Y-Man, the plan to reach the moon, and the actions of Zeno. With this, she sides with the Kingdom of Science and joins them. The group notes that with their small ship, they couldn't make it very far, but Chelsea remarks on how the wind helped her kites. With this in mind, the group creates sails made from Chelsea's kites. With this, Senku's group elude the enemy at a faster pace, while Stanley and his group are infuriated that the enemy can continue to escape. After the Kingdom of Science makes their way into the Amazon rainforest, Stanley decides not to pursue them and instead makes his way to where they'll exit. After creating rubber boots and animal repellent, the crew make their way along rafts down the Amazon River towards Manaus. Chrome comes up with the idea of creating a timed way to use the revival fluid, with Senku suggesting that the Y-Man might anticipate this and create multiple pre-planned attacks with the petrification device. After a while, the crew starts trekking on foot to the source of the petrification, with Suika fishing out a Medusa from the river. This stuns everyone until they realize they're standing in front of a petrification pyramid. Did you enjoy our video? Be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.